Hello everyone. So this video will be dedicated to discussing how we can build our body paragraphs. In the previous video, we discussed how the introductory paragraph should be developed with respect to the details that should be included and what and how we should discuss those details. To recap, we established that all the topics that you are discussing should be introduced, that the relationship between those topics should be made clear, that certain topics might have to be defined, and your last sentence should answer the question that is implied in the prompt that implicates all of these topics. And the answer that I generated to the prompt was that the use of parables to begin each section of the story creates both mystery and tension, because the reader knows that the main characters in the novel will have narratives that mirror the parables, but the reader does not know exactly how. Essentially, I'm asserting or claiming that this uncertainty caused by the reader's knowledge of the parable creates a sense of both mystery and tension. With the introduction established, the body paragraph serves a very specific function, and that is to elaborate on and prove your claim that you made in your thesis statement. Essentially, the thesis statement I generated is an answer without any support, and the body paragraphs are where you provide the justification for your answer. To do this, however, there are very specific skills that will need to be practiced. These skills involve you developing your ability to develop a topic with well-chosen details. Now, the word topic is sometimes thrown around a bit ubiquitously, but in the context of a body paragraph, the topic refers to your answer. As such, you will have to develop your answer, which again, is your thesis or your claim. You will also have to have extended definitions, which basically means explaining things that need to be explained. You will have to include concrete details and/or specific quotes in order to develop your answer, and you'll have to know what type of other information to include, considering the audience's familiarity with the topics, as they pertain to your answer. So these are the objectives for the body paragraphs. Let us see how my Joey Luck Club exemplar meets these objectives. So in the first sentence, I have a well-chosen detail to help develop my answer to the question. I will now pose this question to you. How is there a well-chosen detail that helps to develop my answer? You can pause the video here and reference the exemplar yourself in order to answer the question. And you could include your answer in the class comments as part of your weekly participation in response to the weekly discussion topic, which is documented on Google Classroom and on the syllabus, and they both say the exact same thing. So there is no reason you should not know what it is. So essentially, you can state how I included a well-chosen detail to develop, and develop here means explain and support my answer. And you can discuss how you will do something similar, but with a different detail. I encourage you to do this with each of the other sentences as well. I'm now going to provide you with an answer to that question, so if you were intending on taking my suggestion, pause the video now and type your response. I basically chose a specific instance in the text that provides an example of an event that parallels one of the parables. So in my thesis, or my main claim, I generally state that the reader's knowledge of the parables creates a sense of both mystery and tension, because the reader knows that the outcome of each conflict that each character undergoes is going to somehow mirror the parable. In the body paragraph, I cite a specific event that provides an example of a specific conflict that specific characters undergo that create tension and mystery because of the reader's knowledge of the parable. I am basically providing a specific example that is going to prove my answer, and that is my subclaim with which I am beginning the first body paragraph. In these sentences here, I would say I am including information that is taking the audience's knowledge of the novel into consideration. How am I doing that? To answer this question, I am simply assuming what any good writer should assume, that the audience has very limited knowledge of the topics you are discussing. Since I am assuming that the reader is not totally familiar with the Joy Luck Club, I provide context for the well-chosen detail that I am using to develop or prove my answer. In the next sentence, how do I address any of the skills that are typically practiced when writing a body paragraph? Well, I include a quote to further develop my answer. This particular quote is one that I assert parallels the details from the parable, Feathers from 1,000 Li Away. Of course, I can't just include the quotes and expect that my answer to the question is fully developed. So, how do I return to one of the aforementioned skills in the next two sentences? I would say that I have included an extended definition as I explain what is happening in the quote or what the quote means. Then I include concrete details from the parable and, taking the audience's knowledge into consideration, make an explicit comparison between the duck and the event from the novel that I'm discussing. Then I elaborate and include more concrete details about Anne May's mother, and I explain how these details, along with the reader's knowledge of the parables, create mystery. Then I explain how Anne May's mother is the main character of the novel, perhaps providing an extended definition of sorts as I am explaining what Anne May's mother's role is. And taking the audience's knowledge into consideration, I explain to the reader why her being a main character, coupled with knowledge of other parts of this narrative and the parable, would create tension. Your body paragraph does not have to be nearly as long. This is simply how mine turned out, considering how I write and the particular part of the novel I wanted to discuss. Once more, you are not emulating what I said, rather you are emulating what I did. And here is what I did. I presented the concrete detail of Anne May's mother being the third concubine of Wu Xing as a point in the story where knowledge of the parables can create mystery, tension, or surprise. I take the audience's knowledge into consideration and provide adequate background information, explaining how Wu Xing had 5 wives and how all the wives had different status. There was essentially a class hierarchy among the concubines. I include a specific quote that describes how second wife knew that Wu Xing was superstitious and feared ghosts and pretended to commit suicide when he failed to raise her allowance. I provided an extended definition by elaborating on what is going on in this quote by explaining that second wife knew Wu Xing would be fearful of second wife's ghost should one of her suicide attempts be successful, not knowing that she was faking them, and because of that, he would acquiesce to her every demand. Then I provide an explanation of how concrete details relate to one another by explaining how second wife essentially transforms herself like the duck who turned into a swan in the parable, Feathers from 1,000 Li Away. Then I provide more concrete details about Anne May's mother and how she still has subservient status among the concubines, and that because she is the main character of this narrative, the reader suspects that her story will also parallel that of the ducks in the parable, just as second wife's did. And that is essentially how mystery and tension are created. You should have 3 body paragraphs, so you should reference any 3 events or excerpts from any of the pages you read in order to develop your response to this question. But, in the case of the event that you do not know what to write about, you can base your response, at least in part, on 2 kinds, which is a part of the Joy Luck Club. It can be found on page 72, or by performing the find function, that is, Control F or Command F, and typing in the phrase, "My mother believed you could be anything." This narrative is told from Jing Mei's perspective, and she tells a story that describes her mother, Soyan's, high hopes for her to become better than her Aunt Lindo's daughter, Waverly, to whom Jing Mei is constantly being compared. Soyan tries to turn her daughter, Jing Mei, into a child prodigy like Waverly, and this narrative is about their search to find Jing Mei's prodigal talent. If you don't know what a prodigy is, as I have said many times before, please look it up. You can base part of your response on the first page of that part of the novel, or how many ever pages of that particular narrative you wish to read. But quite honestly, the context with which I had provided you should be enough to begin to generate a response. You would merely have to find the text support and explain it and how it substantiates your answer. So what do you think? How does this event, or any other excerpt of the Joy Luck Club of your choosing, serve as a concrete detail through which you can further develop your thesis or your claim?